All right, everybody, welcome to the Locked On Avalanche podcast. On today's episode, you are going to hear a connection between Gabe Landeskog and Lonzo Ball for quite some time because of this surgery that they had. And some news has come out on the Lonzo Ball side of things that doesn't make you feel too good being an Avalanche and Gabe Landeskog fan. We'll cover that and a lot more. A new episode of Locked On Avalanche coming at you.
You're Locked On Avalanche, your daily podcast on the Colorado Avalanche. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Locked On Avalanche podcast. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day. That is always appreciated. I'm Chris Maselli. With me, as always, is Mr. Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan. Follow us on our social media outlets, LOPN_Avalanche on Twitter, Locked On Avalanche on Instagram. Questions, comments, concerns, and opinions, lockedonavalanche@gmail.com. And follow us on our YouTube channel over on YouTube. Hit subscribe, get notified when a new show goes live. Little under the weather for myself, so I will make it through. Like usually when this happens, the mute button will be my friend today. But we had yesterday off just because it was Memorial Day. So we are back in the saddle again for a week of Locked On Avalanche. And we're going to get to Darren Helm potentially hanging up the skates. Nothing official, but we're hearing things that it could be true. And we will get to Kurtis MacDermid's grade as well. But we're going to start, like I said in the opening, with the what is it, knee cartilage transplant surgery that Gabe Landeskog had. Before he had it and he had that press conference, he said how he spoke with Lonzo Ball of the Chicago Bulls because he had the same surgery. He has not come back from that yet because he had that recently, right? And then there is a report out there that I find it interesting how they worded it. They were like secretly the Buffalo Bills, the Chicago Bulls. Well, I mean, if it's out there, it's not secret anymore, but maybe somehow it got out. But anyway, they said, secretly the Chicago Bulls don't feel like Lonzo Ball is ever going to play again. They think his career is essentially done because of this surgery. Now, everyone heals differently and everyone takes to surgery differently. And you don't know the extent of Lonzo Ball's, or at least I don't, compared to Gabe Landeskog's. So I'm not going to sit here and just say like, well, whatever is happening to Lonzo Ball is going to happen to Gabe Landeskog. But it does make you notice. And it does make you say like, okay, this is the conversations we're going to be having for the next year.
Yeah, and the thing around this surgery, this knee cartilage transplant, it's the last ditch effort before you do total knee replacement. And it's why it's the new cool thing to do, because when you brought up the Chicago Bulls with Lonzo Ball and the NHL, this is knee replacement is something you really don't want to have in either sport. And you bring up Terrell Davis before when we talked about Gabe Landeskog. This is something that will impede your production. And is Austin Carroll over on Pippin Ain't Easy. Fantastic.
Like is it Pippin? Like Scotty
Yes,
Pippen?
Scotty Pippen.
Oh, I love that.
It's the Chicago Bulls theme blog.
Very nice. Very nice. Nice done.
He mentioned that this knee cartilage replacement, no NBA player has come back from this surgery. And this is the NBA. They are not on skates.
Well, they're not. I have two questions. What, how many players even had this? Like, I don't know the answer to that.
Yep.
I don't know how many, like, this seems like it's relatively new surgery, and I could be completely wrong in that too. I don't know how many have actually had it.
And it doesn't cite it in the blog post how many have, but no one has. I know when Jack Eichel came back with that experimental surgery on his neck, it was new, it was revolutionary, and it seemed to work. But you don't see the success stories with this new surgery. It's new and it's preventing you from going under the knife to get a replacement. But it seems like both outcomes are looking the same for Lonzo Ball and possibly Gabe Landeskog, because you would like to see Landeskog come back, but we've already had one failed surgery, and now we're going to another surgery that doesn't really have the greatest track record to this point.
So when he was getting this surgery, he was about to get it, Gabe Landeskog, and even in his press conference, what was the percent? It was like 85% recovery rate or 90% recovery rate. What is that recovery of what? Like just your normal way of living?
That's what it's
Because is it not like to go back and play your career again in sports? Because that's a little misleading then. You know what I mean? If it's just 90% recovery rate or 80, even if it's 80 still good. Let's go with 80. Let's lowball it and go 80. If it's 80% just to get back to daily life, great. But when you're playing a sport, I don't know if that 80% comes into play with recovery rate.
you can't take those numbers and justify it as a quantifiable number to come back to the game of hockey. It's much more stress. It's much more demand. Yes, the shifts are what? I mean, a minute max, minute 10, minute 20.
At the most, yeah.
Like that's what you're pushing, and you're getting a couple of those a game, but still, that's a lot. Lace them up, get out on the ice, and see how your perfectly healthy knees feel after getting on the ice for the first time in a long time. This will be Gabe Landeskog's after 2 years. So that's a lot to factor into the possibility of Gabe Landeskog coming back to the NHL. And now you're seeing with Lonzo Ball possibly being done in the NBA, it's not that much stress. Yes, there's a lot of turn and torque, but you're not on skates.
Well, you're not. And I don't want to minimize, like if you're playing a sport, you need your knees.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It doesn't, we can have a power ranking of sports and where your knees are most important, but
not darts.
But the difference is pretty razor thin, right? Yeah. Because like in basketball, yeah, you need your knees. In football, you need your knees. You're running in the majority of sports without darts. Yeah, you're not really doing. I mean, you're running to the dartboard when you get a bullseye, pointing at it. At least my one career bullseye. But it's probably the most vital, other than your eyes. It's the most vital part of your body in sports. So I just don't like the new. You don't like hearing it, and we've talked about this a lot. We are going to be talking about it much more because he's out for a year, and any new inkling of news like this that we get, we're probably going to bring it up again. And does this deter me in how we had talked about it before? And like, do we think his career is over? We asked the question. It was, in the 5 burning questions, which we did last week, that was one of them. Is his career over? And I went to the side of, no, I don't think it's over, because I think he's going to give it a shot. I think he's going to try to like recover from this and recoup from this and go out and try to play again. The duration of that is a different question. So again, go back to the beginning of what I said in the beginning of like, they're 2 different guys. The injuries, like I don't know what the severity of Lonzo Ball was. I don't really follow the NBA, so I don't know what the severity of it was, but it must have been bad if you got to have that surgery. Same thing with Gabe Landeskog. We know how bad his was. So we're still in the wait and see approach for the future. But when you hear that, and I've actually reached out to the Locked On Bulls guys. I sent them a message. I sent them the tweet that was put out. And I said, what is the truth? What are you hearing about this? Is there any truth to this? And I sent that shortly before we hit record, so they haven't got back to me yet. So if they do, and there is some validity to it, maybe we'll just do an update for tomorrow. But as of right now, like it doesn't change my perspective going forward, but it does, my dog ears did perk up a little bit when I read that.
Well, all the everydayers also know I did choose no when that burning question was asked. And this is almost, because yes, it's a new experimental surgery, but even still, that's a failed surgery before. And you're judging off of like, this is 2 years. It's going to be rough to come back to NHL caliber quality of play. I just don't see it happening. And then the more the grind goes on, and then he's going into his third off season to get ready for next year, the year after. It's Landy's going to have to look at it and determine if this is actually worth it all, and what am I doing, and how long will this last?
I think about it if you're Gabe Landeskog, and we'll move on after this. But think if you're Gabe Landeskog and you hear that news, and you had specifically reached out to Lonzo Ball, before you had the surgery to kind of get his info on it, and it's not, we're not getting a retirement press conference for Lonzo Ball right now. So this is just out there. It's a news article. We'll see if they refute it or anything like that. But just think about it. If you are Gabe Landeskog and you hear that, it might just, again, I don't think it's going to change how it's not changing really my perspective of future for me. It's probably not for him either right now, because it's so early in the game for him in his recovery time. So you still don't want to hear it, is basically like the gist of this whole thing. So someone whose retirement press conference might be on the horizon, and that's Darren Helm. Word is going around. So we will talk about that next. But first, we are going to talk about eBay Motors. And for a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. And it's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your car to the My Garage tab and look for the green check to know that your part will fit, or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game. And when you shop on eBay Motors, and they have over 122 million parts to choose from, so you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, and exclusions apply. So was going around, the first person that I saw put this up was Adrian Dater. And he heard from a source that Darren Helm is getting ready to call it a career. There were other people posting it with Dater was the only one who put up the sources part. I think everybody else was going off of him, which is fine, whatever. But if I kind of feel like it's probably going to happen. You know what I mean? I just at his age, it was a struggle for him last year. If that didn't happen, if last year's injury-riddled season did not happen for him, maybe we'd be somewhere else right now. Maybe hey, I'm healthy. If he had a year where he contributed, I'm still contributing. So I think he continues to go. But I think when you're at his age, you're just about 36, you've won 2 championships. And you did just go through a very difficult season that you tried to come back from a couple times, and then you got put back on IR. It would make sense to me right now.
Honestly, going into this season, I would have anticipated him retiring after the Cup.
Why is that?
You just kind of had that feeling like, well, yeah, Darren Helm's going to retire after this year. Because the Cup winning season also is injury riddled. So you just kind of had that assumption in your mind. Yeah, he's going to retire, but he came back and you're like, well, this is nice. This is refreshing. But then he didn't. And then he did. And then he didn't. His entire time with the Avalanche, he hasn't contributed at least 20 points. He hasn't done that since 2017. So it's been a long road for Darren Helm. And I'm pretty sure after the stress of last year and watching everybody around him also suffer with injuries, he's got to look at it and say, you know what, this has been fun. My time in Detroit was so much fun. Colorado was also a nice little send-off. I can't keep doing this.
And I mean, look at his career. I'm looking at it now. Like his career high in points was 33. And that was smack in the middle of his career. That was in 14-15. Where he played 75 games, obviously for Detroit. What was the
He
let's see.
played 82 games in 2010,
Was
13
that?
years ago.
I mean, yeah, but all right. So he played 68 for the Avalanche in his first year with them, which is good. But he's not out there to be your dynamic scorer, right? Um, he's there to he's a career depth guy, but he was perfect for that role.
Yeah.
He had great speed. He was a really good defenseman for a forward. He just went out there and did his job. And he was always out there, and you just felt it was one of those guys where you just went out there and you felt comfortable when he was out there. And we say he's not like this scoring machine, and he never has been, but he has one of the all-time greatest goals in Avalanche history. All-time greatest goals in Avalanche history against St. Louis to bury them and get the Avs beyond the second round. And for as long as this slide for the St. Louis Blues continues, all Avalanche fans are going to point to Darren Helm as the reason why. So he does things like that. You know what I mean? I mean, I celebrated hard for the Stanley Cup, but when that goal happened, I told you, I almost needed to have cartilage transplant surgery because I nailed my knee on my coffee table and jumped up and came down on it. But it was just it's an epic moment in Avalanche history, and it belongs to him.
And Darren Helm also, he had that reputation in Detroit of being that playoff captain clutch kind of guy in the playoffs. He was always that big moment guy, and especially on their cup runs. And it was nice to see him kind of capture that magic again in Colorado. I mean, I agree with you, one of the biggest moments for the Avalanche, really just, making that next step on the way to winning the cup. It was such a big moment. So it was nice to see him have that shades of vintage Darren Helm, but I think those days are done, and I think he's starting to realize it. And after last year, I think it's not fun anymore.
It could be.
When you're spending all your time rehabbing and getting back to ice shape, it's not fun anymore.
It could be. And like I said, because he's that career depth guy, career bottom six guy, it's not like he in the early stages of his career, he was like putting up gaudy numbers or anything like that. And he's still trying to hang on to something. He's been like a consistent depth guy throughout his career. And that's who he is. And does he want to keep doing that? Does he want to put his body through another season when he's going to get 10 minutes a game? You know what I mean? Like, and I just feel like when guys at his age get to this point, they're like, maybe if he didn't win a cup, he comes back and goes and signs with a team who needs some depth help, and that's a contender. If the Avs didn't want him back. But I just feel like, I mean, if this is true, there has been nothing out of the Avalanche camp or the Darren Helm camp to say this is true. But I think when Dater posted it and says he has a source, and you look at everything, it makes complete sense why it would happen.
Well, we spent the last week and a half talking about UFAs and moves the Avalanche could possibly make to get back to contender status for next year. And do you really want? It's not like the Avalanche are going to just flip a switch and be a contender next year. There's a lot of pieces they have to put together and construct this roster. And if I'm Darren Helm, do you really want to be part of a semi rebuild, like put back together?
That word. No, don't use that word in Avalanche land.
You have your core there, but
and the core will
losing,
carry you.
Yeah, you're losing so many other pieces, and then where does Darren Helm really rate in importance? Because you mentioned he's a depth guy. Like, it's nice to get 10 minutes, but we also need a second line, third line, fourth line. Like, Darren Helm's got to look at this and is it, what am I doing here? Am I helping the team? What is my role? Can I contribute for more games than I gave them last year? Am I at that point in my career to keep it together? There's a lot of questions. So if he hangs it up, it's not a surprise. But if he comes back, I like to see what he can bring for one more go.
Yeah, if he doesn't want to end his career like this, you know what I mean? Like, I put in so much to the sport. I don't want my last year to be 11 games and not a single point.
Yeah.
Or if he wants to look at it and say, hey, I've had a good career. I've got 2 cups under my belt with 2 teams. You can't fault him for wanting to take that road either.
Yeah.
So we'll have to wait and see until something official comes out. And if it does, we'll obviously bring it up again. But it seems like the writing is on the wall for this to be a thing. And for the Avalanche, I think that's okay. Like, we went over many times they're unrestricted free agents and kind of the ages that they are. And I think the Avs do need to get a little bit younger. And if Helm wanted to come back, you'd have to really take a hard look at it because of that season that he had last year. And it's like, is he going to replicate being injured again? So, I don't know. We'll have to, like I said, we'll see if an official word comes out and bring it up if and when it does come official. And if it doesn't, then everybody's wrong. And we all move on. All right, last thing to get to today, and that is the season grade for Kurtis MacDermid. And even Darren Helm, like, he played so few games, we didn't even do a grade for him this year because how are you going to grade him? But for MacDermid, I was surprised that he actually played as many games as he did, which if you're watching on YouTube, there's his stat card. 44 games played for Kurtis MacDermid. Didn't seem like that. Seemed like half of that, if you ask me. Not much to write home about in the points department, but that is not his game. A single goal, which happened to be a game-winning goal, believe it or not. 5 assists for a total of 6 points. He was a -1. I forgot to get rid of that. I have a +-1 in his plus-minus department.
So he's a net zero.
He's a net zero. No. 55 penalty minutes, an average ice time of 8 minutes and 20 seconds. And there you see the scores on Instagram. 44% said C. Twitter, 40% said D and F. On YouTube, 54% said C. And Kyle and I both went with a C-. I upgraded I did have him at a D+ to begin with, but I did upgrade him to a C-. And I think the main reason I did that is because his game is to be the physical presence. Like he's huge. He's a beast of a man. And he's there for, settling scores and things like that. And the weird thing about it is, like, there are times when you wanted him to do that and he didn't. And there's times where it doesn't really call for the situation for him to get into a scrum, and he does. So it's like it's kind of like backwards on how Kurtis MacDermid picks and chooses his battles. And maybe that's not all him. I'm sure a lot of that's coming from the coaching staff to be like, nah, we don't press the issue here. We don't need this. But when, the one that sticks out in everybody's head is Cale Makar, when he goes down, and you would expect someone like Kurtis MacDermid that's the perfect opportunity. That's why he's on this team.
Yeah.
And it's radio silence. So when I saw the 55 penalty minutes in 44 games, that did surprise me. I didn't think he had that many, to be honest with you. So I bumped him up a little bit to a C-.
Now, when it comes to formulating a grade for Kurtis MacDermid, it's the most baffling thing you can possibly do on this planet. Last year, he played 58 games, had 1 less point. He had 89 penalty minutes. He had 55 this year. He had 1 more point than last year in 44 games. He turned a leaf when it came to this offensive side. Like, he had a couple moments that I remember last year. We kind of joked. I know you really did not like MacDermid for a while.
No.
And I remember the whole way of the cup run. After we get done with an episode, I'd always tell you, we're really going to win a Stanley Cup with Kurtis MacDermid, aren't we? Yeah. And he was almost like a pylon, kind of a running joke for a lot of people. This year, he kind of put in this effort, which was strange and refreshing at times. Like, he had a slap shot. He was facilitating. He was driving deep. It was like Kurtis MacDermid enjoyed the cup run so much that he decided, you know what, this hockey thing, I could do more than just punch people. And it was nice. It was refreshing, but
Mm.
it's also, when you look at the stats and the points and everything that he provides, he's not the greatest when it comes to scoring or setting stuff up. He's not a great defender. It's almost like Nikita Zadorov type defense, where it's not the greatest. Like, if you catch him at the right time, Dermy's going to be right there on you, but you
Yeah.
can easily move around him and make him look foolish.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's
Easily.
hard to put a grade on. Like, he's making a step forward, less games, but that's not always on him, because there are nights that he's getting scratched. Did not see the playoffs. Like,
Didn't know. Nope.
it's such an
Tough.
enigma, this Kurtis MacDermid guy.
It's tough. And you have, like, here's some comments from, I'll start with Twitter. Who's this guy? McLovin325 says, I give him a C. Didn't really help the squad, yet at the same time, I didn't think he really hurt them either. And I think there's some validity to that. Like,
That's
I mean, if
really
you
well
think
said.
like not getting into scrums is not helping them, you know, again, that might be coming from up high and telling him, like, we don't need to do this all the time. But I think there were several moments where you're just expecting it.
Yeah.
Like when you go after, you know, the Golden Boys and they get, you know, concussion. That's not a real word. Concussed. You're expecting that, and it didn't happen. Let's see. So who's this one? Go ahead.
Quickly to that point, you also have to remember Jared Bednar, one of his first moves as head coach was get rid of Cody McLeod for that reason.
Yeah, I don't think he likes to play that style. I don't think he wants to be known as the team who has that. Like, here's a good quote, and this is from at Shred Colorado. He said, I mean, I think we all love the novelty of Dermy, but he isn't an NHL caliber player. I'm not going to go as far as say he's not an NHL caliber player. He is. Like, he has a value. But we do, like, I think the Avalanche like the fact that they have him on the team and think that's intimidating enough.
Yep.
And players won't go mess with anybody for fear of retribution from Kurtis MacDermid. Well, I think there's some teams that have figured out they're not going to send him after us.
Yeah.
So, like he's saying, like, I think there's a novelty of him, and I think the novelty has worn off.
Yeah.
If you're not going to have, you know, guys like Cale Makar get knocked out of multiple games, and Kurtis MacDermid is just warming a bench, no, like that. I think he's onto something with that comment.
Yeah,
So.
and it's not a Bednar style, and you don't see him like. It's why you don't see the big brutes last a long time in Colorado. It's just not the Colorado way. Even when things are called for and is justified, they're not being sent out.
This is over on YouTube. I something Battle Axe. I don't know. Battle Axe 4257. There's mad. I don't know. I don't know how people come up with these names, whatever. But we'll go with Battle Axe 4257. He didn't really make an impact this season. The few times he was on the ice, it was not. I don't know if he means impressed there. Maybe he says I was not impressed. I wish there was a way to give a C-. Well, that's how you do it. I can't put plus and minus in the polls. That's why I comment in the grade it and then comment as a C-. So he's kind of on the same field as we are. And then Brent 5181, not even sure why the Avs brought him back. He's bad on defense and sucks on offense. No one accepts fights from him, so he's just taking up a roster spot. I don't know if anybody accepts fight from him. I don't think the Avalanche sent him out to fight. He's got some. He's got, I think there was like 5-minute for fightings that he had. And I'm not saying you should expect more of that. And just when he's out there, he's just around to headhunt. Like, I don't want that. But I want, you know, we keep going back to the Cale Makar one, and there was others. I want the guy, it's like, hey, this isn't going to happen. I feel like you got that last year with him. You got it more from him last year. And he was mixing it up a lot more, it seemed that way, last year than he did this previous year.
Yeah, because that fight with Delorier was last year. McDermid Delorier tilt that went down last year, and that was what everybody remembers.
Delorier, like number 9, like they would always
Yeah.
go at it, and it just seems like that put a stop to it.
But when it comes to like making things even, when Nate got his nose broken, that was EJ taking up for him. It's not Kurtis MacDermid being sent out there. It's usually other guys taking up in the moment if needed. So I think we kind of exaggerate that role because of what he could be if we were the fantasy GM, but that's just not what the Avalanche do.
No. So that's where he's at. He's a C- for us. And that's our first D/F in a while. I can't remember the last one we've had, but the people of Twitter were not impressed with Kurtis MacDermid. So 40% went the DF route. Well, we're going to follow up Kurtis MacDermid with, I think, A's across the board. We got Nathan McKinnon is up next. So that should be up right now. If you're listening to this on Tuesday morning, that should be up on your social media of choice. So vote and definitely comment away because that's going to be a fun one. So that's going to be it for today, everybody. Thank you for tuning in and making this your first listen of the day. Like we said before, that is always appreciated. And we'll be back tomorrow. If we get any news on Darren Helm, if the Locked On Bulls guys get back to me, and anything else that goes on in the world of the Avalanche, we will be discussing it. Until then, he is Mr. Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan. I'm Chris Maselli. This is the Locked On Avalanche podcast, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.